I will just dice these up. I try to hold this so that if I slip, there is no way that I will lose a finger no matter what. So this part of it, again, I set it down on something flat, and basically I'm just going to kind of cut around the outside edge of this. And my goal is to avoid going to the emergency room. We've had some issues with that, right, Patty?
Yes, indeed. I was hosting an event pre-COVID times, and slipped and ended up having to go to urgent care to get 5 stitches. So it's good to be wise and careful.
Yeah, we're just going to not do that tonight. We're going to be careful, not hurt ourselves. None of you guys should hurt yourselves either. All right, so I can feel behind me that things are heating up over here. My pan is getting hot. And so now I have in here about 3.5 cups of butternut squash. So all of that is going to go into the oil over there. Then with the extra that I have, we can take a look at that, Cam. And so I'm just going to leave that there, and I'll toss that around every couple minutes. We're going to just start cooking that over here. But with the rest of it, I'm just going to quickly chop that up with the seeds and everything. And basically, all of this is still really good and good flavor. And so we're going to stick that into the stock so that it makes the whole thing more flavorful, and then we'll strain it out later. So all of that goes into a bowl. Chicken stock and chicken broth are basically the same thing. Chicken stock is made from bones. Chicken broth is not. And when you buy them in a box from a grocery store, they're all pretty much identical. So it doesn't really matter. You could even use water, so, and extra salt. But chicken broth seems pretty good. And so I'm going to pour that into my other pot that I have going here. And if I'm going too fast or too complicated or too slow or too anything, feel free to let me know. Yes, well, I highly recommend making your own stock too. So first, roast a chicken and eat that with your family. And then a day later, make the stock and then use that to make this. But here we are. So, so I've got the chicken stock that we're going to start warming up over there, and I've got the butternut squash that's cooking. And let's see, what is the next thing that I want to do? I think the next thing I want to do is start addressing the onions. So I have 2 onions, and a really great book called The Supper of the Lamb. And can you guys still hear me with the food cooking in the background? Great. For the squash, do I keep it on high heat or leave it alone for now? I do leave it alone. I don't have it on high heat. I have it on 7 on mine. So I don't know what that is, like extra medium high. And I just am leaving it there and not moving it. That's going to start to caramelize the sugars that are in the butternut squash and make them all happy. It's starting to smell good in here. Yeah, so a great book called The Supper of the Lamb, which is sort of 2 parts theology and 2 parts cookbook, where on the one hand, this Episcopal priest is teaching you how to cook a lamb leg in multiple dinners in all different ways. And on the other hand, he's also talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb at the end of creation, or at the end of Revelation. And it's just it hits all my boxes. Like, it's cooking and theology, and it's just great. But he suggests that you sit down with an onion and spend like an hour looking at it and understanding it and thinking about it. And so I've sat down with an onion and like very slowly look at it. And like he said, like take off the little thin layer that you normally just throw away. And like in inside it's like iridescent in there, and it's just so cool, even though on the outside it's dull. And I, of course, had never noticed that. So anyway, there you go. There's a little thing you can notice. But we're going to press on today, and we're going to cut the onion. And so the way that I dice onions, if there's something that's just flaky and easy to peel off, you can easily peel it off. But if it's sticking to it, that's fine. So I cut off the top, and then I cut through the root, but I leave the root on there. And that's awesome, because now it doesn't fall apart on you. And so if there's still a part that you need to peel, you can peel that really easily. You can even just peel one of the edges of the onion, and that will take that all apart. Just taking a quick look at this. That's not burning over there, so we're good there. So I've taken off the dry part of the onion. And if I leave the root on there, I can cut one way, and the onion is still all together and hasn't fallen apart. And then I can turn my knife and go across. And then I can go one more time down. And I have diced up the whole onion. And then I just have that little sort of holding piece that I toss at the end. So that's my dicing onion technique for you. And so as we go, we're going to dice up 2 onions. And we're golden brown. So now we do a little salt and pepper. So I've got my salt. I'm going to just come over to move the camera over here. Let's see. Right about like that. I have this little salt pincher thing. I do the salt from up high. I never really measure it with measuring spoons, but that's a 2-finger pinch of salt that I just did. So thumb and 2 index fingers. So a 2 or 3-finger pinch of kosher salt seems like a good amount. My fingers are big. Yours might be smaller. Anyway, there's our salt and pepper. We're going to stir that in. Oh, is this smelling good for you guys? So here's our head of garlic. The recipe says 2 cloves of garlic. I always add extra. So I'm going to do 4. I think the one takeaway is, I always make things according to the recipe the first time I do it, but then it's not quite so particular for the most part, cooking things like this. Baking's a little different, but for cooking, like if you like garlic more, you can put 4 cloves in instead of 2 and you're fine. Or if you don't have to have it in there. But so the way I do garlic is I have the little root end somewhere. There we go. I feel like a weatherman trying to do it on a green screen to get it to show up in the thing. But the root end, that's where all of the paper holds on. So if you cut the root end off of the garlic, and then with the side of your knife, just press down a little bit, the garlic kind of breaks apart, but the paper just falls off. And so after peeling many hundreds of heads of garlic, that is the fastest, easiest, don't need a complicated contraption way I have ever done that. So there you go. That's my garlic trick. How's it coming over there, Emily? I can tell that Emily is cooking along. I can't tell for others. Yes, it's fine. These things are all going into basically soup. So it's fine if some of your pieces are darker or almost black. But basically, we're just trying to get them cooked through. So, I mean, it's kind of hot to touch them, but you could poke it with a fork to see how it's done. but that's how brown mine look. And if this is your first time ever doing this and you're doing it while watching a Zoom call, like it's not going to be perfect, and that's fine. So anyway, there you go. So that's the first bit there. So those are done. I'm going to put those in a bowl just to get them out of the way. There's a French word for having everything all prepped and ready ahead of time. It's called mise en place, which is super helpful and makes it way easier to cook. But it also makes a massive mess because you've got way more things to clean up afterwards. So there's somewhere in there a happy medium between. But our butternut squash is cooked, so that's good. Our onions are ready. We're going to now cook up the other reserved squash fibers and seeds and whatever. And so the pan goes back to medium. The camera comes back to the pan. All of those seeds and stuff go in there. Bring that out a little bit. There's the little thing you can, you see people do where they like flip the stuff in the pan instead of stirring it. And all I can say is that it just takes a lot of time and picking up food off the floor to learn how to do that, and then it's fine. So yeah, you could practice with, I don't know, like dried beans or something, which would be a little bit less sticky, but then you've still got to pick up dried beans off the floor. So I don't know. But whoa, hello. See, not perfect. The amount of mess that I create while cooking drives my wife crazy. So it's like a package deal. I like to cook. I'm not a bad cook, but I am a messy cook. And there's that's what I have. Okay, so we can press this garlic while that finishes cooking. We've got the garlic now. And you could certainly, if you don't have a garlic press, chop that, but I do have a garlic press, so I'm going to just squish it through there. And I'm putting it in with the onions. I don't have to dirty another bowl. And it's going to go in the recipe at the same time as the onions, so we're safe there. All right, any other questions for where we're at so far? Or comments, or this is all stuff that you know and it's all easy, or?
Are we cooking the onion yet, or is it just?
Not quite yet. I've just been prepping it, so it's still sitting here. The only thing that's cooking right now is just the squash.
Okay, all right.
Or just the squash, like seeds and stuff. And that is probably enough.
What are you doing with the broth right now? Just letting it warm up?
Yeah, I'm just letting it warm up, which, you know, if you haven't done yet, you can, and that'll be the next thing. So the next thing is to take a pot that has the broth. Let's see if I can let you see a little bit of that pot. And then I'm going to take the butternut squash that I've been cooking and stick that in the pot with the broth. I think we're probably going to add some water to that too. Let's see what the recipe says. Add a cup of water. So it calls for unsalted butter. I don't understand the virtue of unsalted butter. Like on toast, you don't want unsalted butter. You want it, and who wants to have two kinds of butter in their fridge? So anyway, just sprinkle in a little less salt later on or something, but unsalted butter is not for me. So 3 tablespoons now goes in there. And that's what we're going to do with the onions. Okay, well, there you go, Georgia. For baking, like sweet things, I guess, having a little bit of control over how much salt goes in it is good. Trying to clean up some of the mess on the floor here. Okay. So we'll come over with the pan cam. And once our butter is melted, now I've got the garlic and the onions are going in there. And, just to have a pick of like how much the exact amounts matter or don't matter. Like this just calls for 2 small onions. But like, how big exactly is a small onion? And what difference would it make if it was a medium onion? I mean, you don't want an onion like the size of my head, but like it'll be fine if you had a little bit less or a little bit more. All right, so this spoon that I have here, I custom designed and carved, and then my dad finished it off for me. I like it because it has a curved side on one side and a straight side on the other side, and flat on the bottom, so that you can, if you've got stuff stuck on a pan, you can really scrape at it. But then if you need to get it a curved edge, you can get it around on the curved edge or on the straight part. So anyway, my invention, and I like it. We'll put some salt and pepper in the kitchen tool line front. I have had many different pepper grinders, and this OXO one I like because you can make it a little bit more coarse, and you really get a lot of pepper out with every grind. So I like that. This little salt thing I copied from Good Eats and found at a kitchen supply store. Let's see, what else are we doing here? We did our salt and pepper. Those are softening. So those are getting happy. Yeah, well, now we're making risotto. How many of you guys have ever made risotto before?
I have never made risotto, but I have eaten it.
Well, there you go. That's good. Yeah, I can't remember the first time I made it. I don't know if I made butternut squash risotto until I was at least dating Melissa, but it's certainly a favorite of hers. But the basic, what we're looking for in the end is something really creamy and soupy. There's no actual cream in the recipe, but that's sort of the consistency that we're looking for. And the starch in this short grain rice, there's like 2 different kinds of starch in rices, and this, I don't remember which one is which, amylose and amylopectin. Anyone can check my math. But the one that is in short grain rice makes it more goopy when you cook it versus long grain rice. And so sushi rice is going to be short. That's why it all sticks together. And the normal rice that you might have at a Chinese food place is long grain rice. And that's not as all stick together-y. And so this Italian kind, what we're trying to do is to get all of the starch that's both on the outside, well, mostly on the outside of the rice, to be into the sauce, and that will thicken it. And then we want to cook the rice itself, obviously. So these onions are getting happy. They are getting mostly translucent, so you can start to see through them, and that's a good sign that those are getting close to the point where we want to add the rice to this. And what we're doing, adding rice before we add liquid, like if you're just making a pot of rice, you would put rice and water in a pot. When we cook it first in some fat, in the butter, we're toasting the kernels of rice. We're also toasting the starch on the outside of it too, and so it'll be a little bit less gloopy than it otherwise would be. But the main thing that we're doing is changing the taste to make it taste toasty. So I have 2 cups of rice, which is what the recipe calls for. The bag contains, I don't know, about a half a cup more rice then we need, as we've talked about the numbers, you probably could just add a little bit more chicken stock and add a little bit more rice and you'd be fine. But we'll stick with the 2 cups for tonight. So we'll stick the rice in. And these we're going to cook for about 3 minutes. And what you're looking for, these rice kernels will start to change color. And the outside edges of them will start to look translucent. The center of it will still be opaque. So that's sort of what you're looking for. But we'll take about 3 minutes to let that stir in. All right, for those of you guys that are cooking along with me, are you still able to keep up, and are things looking about the same on your end?
My onions are still going, like cooking, but I'm keeping up fine.
All right.
Yeah, I'm a little behind, but I'm good.
Okay, great.
Wait, quick question. So after the onions finish, do you take them out and then you put in the rice?
No, the onions are still in here. The onions will stay in it now from now until the end. So the onions are still in there. I just added the rice to the onion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. So I don't know if you can see it on there, but there's still onion in the pot. The onions, the garlic, the butter, and now the rice are all together. And the basic idea of using a big wide frying pan like this to do this is, once we start adding liquid to this, the only thing that's real, it's obviously a lot hotter down at the bottom than it is up at the top, right? I can touch it up top, but it's hundreds of degrees warmer touching the metal. So you want the rice to be touching, touching the heat. And so that's why we're stirring it. Sometimes recipes will say things like, you keep stirring risotto to like knock the starch off of the grains of rice. But while that might happen a little bit, that doesn't happen much. That's not really what's happening. Right now, they're starting to toast. And they're absorbing a little bit of the butter. So we'll go 1 more minute on those. While that's going, I will open up my Parmesan cheese from Trader Joe's. I mean, we're not going to really go wrong here. Oh, that smells so good. You can tell it's really from Italy. I mean, there's labels all over it that say it's a product of Italy, but the Parmesan from Italy has these little marks on the side of it that say Parma. So that's how you can tell on the outside rind. And I'm just going to grate that as we wait. So I'd love to hear from some of you guys while so my rice is starting to actually turn a little bit brown and toasty, and so it's definitely ready. And so I'm gonna now move to the next step, which is to add some water to that. It's actually to add some broth to that, but let's see. Okay, so I have an empty bowl, and I have a strainer, and I have this pot that I've been cooking all that leftover squash guts and seeds. And so I'm just going to pour that through there. In any other world, I would have done that over the sink, but you can't see over the sink with my camera angle. So there you go. And now I have some orangish, yellowish broth, and I'm going to put 3 cups of that into the rice. And now,
Wait, quick question.
yep.
I may have missed something pretty big. Do we toss all of these cut up squash into the broth?
The cut up squash that we cooked and did very nicely, we did not put in the broth.
But only the seeded parts?
The seeded parts and any of the extra went into the broth.
Okay, thank you.
Which way did you do it?
I didn't put anything into the broth yet.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, skip that part.
Really?
Yeah.
It won't taste different?
It'll taste different, but you haven't done it this way, so it'll taste like it tastes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is add, so we've added half of the broth to the rice and onions. And now we're going to add half of the squash in there too. The reason we're adding half now and half later is this first half is going to kind of disintegrate and become the sauce. And then the other half will add back in and be like the texture. And so we don't need to do much to this. We just kind of leave it there for a couple minutes, and then we'll stir it, and then we'll leave it there, and we'll stir it every few minutes. Like, I think sort of the very traditional way to do risotto is to be constantly stirring it and adding just little tiny bits of liquid at a time as it needs it. But this way seems to work just fine. I'm just finishing grating up cheese here. Oof. Try to not grate my fingers as I go. All right. Any other good favorite meals? Hannah, I'm glad to hear that. Me too. I'm also making a mess. All right, so I'm just stirring, and you can see that most of the liquid is actually absorbing and evaporating away now. So we're going to soon be at the spot where we'll add another spoonful of liquid. So basically, as the rice dries up, once it gets pretty dry like that, then it's time to add another scoop of the stock.
Brian, do you have a favorite dish that you like to cook?
Oh boy. In another, like 9 years ago, pre-kids, I loved making new things that I had never made before. That was my favorite thing, was to like make something new. I think my amount of disposable time for making new things has dramatically decreased. And my youngest two are not very adventurous. Like macaroni and cheese is by far and away what they would eat every meal, unless they wanted to swap it out for oatmeal or an egg sandwich. So I, yeah, I've been less adventurous of late. Um, so what is my favorite thing to cook? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like doing stuff like this, but I just don't get to do it as often as I once did. So I still like learning new things and trying new things, but it's a season. That season will come back, I'm sure. But I remember so I used to live in the Wilson House, which is a house that Park Street Church owns over in Cambridge, and I lived there for 5 years with like 17 people, and we would have a house dinner every Monday night, and that was just so much fun. But it also meant that I could practice making a big meal every week. I mean, different people were in charge different nights, but often I would get to cook. And so it gave me plenty of confidence knowing, hey, I can cook for 17 people. That won't be a problem. And if you cooked, there were other people that would do the cleanup. So that was like a win-win for me. And that was where I got a lot of reps in. I also would like TiVo cooking shows and watch those in marathons too. I think the two cooking shows that I'm watching right now are The Great British Bake Off, which is just completely delightful, and the Chef Show with Jon Favreau, which is also great. It was a really fun movie, and then to have him, cook with lots of famous people that he likes and learn how to cook is really fun to watch. Yeah, you were asking what I've been cooking lately. This COVID, one of our neighbors gave us a sourdough starter, and so I've been making sourdough bread and keeping my little sourdough starter alive since April. And that it's still alive is pretty great. And I've done lots of little things, sourdough pancakes and sourdough waffles and sourdough English muffins and stuff like that. But for the bread, I've just done one bread recipe, the same one every time, over and over and over again, because I would like to be to the point where I can just make bread. But after making it, I don't know, 40 loaves or so, I'm not there yet. I just can't quite remember the numbers in the order and how many times you have to do the different things. And so I still look at the recipe every time, but we'll get there.
Need to get your tonnage in.
That's right. That's right. Way to have a callback, Patty.
Some of us were at the podcast time earlier today, and we were talking about a podcast that Jerry Seinfeld did, and he was talking about like how do you become good in a craft, essentially. And one of his things was he was just saying you have to work at it a lot, and he kind of used that word of like tonnage. You just have to do something a ton.
So we'll let it go for one more minute, and then while that finishes up, I'm gonna come back over and we'll chop a little bit of sage and shave a little bit of nutmeg and stuff. So 2 tablespoons of sage. So I break off the bottoms of the little bits of stems there. So I just have leaves left. And I line them all up. And then I kind of roll them up. Basically, I'm just trying to have like a ball of herbs. And then I'm gonna just do little rocking motions. There we go. That's done. And then ground nutmeg is fine. I just happen to have some actual nutmegs. I don't know if you guys have ever cooked with like real nutmegs before, but they look like that. Nope, they look like that. They are like little nuts, but they smell amazing. Mm. And that actually smells kind of like sage, kind of like nutmeg, because I've got it all over my hands. Okay. So now our risotto is done cooking. So you can see if I pull that back, it doesn't just rush right back in with liquid, but it's still bubbly and pretty soft. So we're going to turn off the heat. I'm actually going to move it away from the heat so it doesn't keep cooking. And I'm going to add in the cheese and the sage. And then I'm going to grate some nutmeg on it. And then I have the rest of the butternut squash that I cooked at the beginning. So just stick that in there. And there are some just classic flavor combinations, and one of them is butternut squash and sage. And, you know, put those things inside a ravioli, unbelievable. Cook them with some pork chops or something, so good. Anyway, so sage is a good combo with butternut squash, whatever you like. So right now the cheese is melting, everything's getting happy. And now's the moment when Patty can be sad because she is not eating this right now.
Yeah,
So
I am sad about that. I was just thinking, I was like, that's a 25-minute drive to the Ellis's house.
yeah, and you're thinking, I bet he still has some left in 25 minutes if I got in the corner right now. Hard to know where to look as you try to do this. Oh. That is so good. Oh my goodness. I'm going to switch over my camera here. So I can look at you guys again. Yeah, that's just amazing. Totally worth it. So good.
Do you pair anything with this dish? What would you eat alongside it, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would eat this as a main course. And then, I don't know, maybe it seems like a good wintry thing. So maybe I'd saute up some kale or something, you know, green and healthy-ish. Maybe, I do think like pork something, like a pork loin or a pork chop or pork something might be good. Tonight I will just be eating this.
The pork can be for your next online cooking
That's
crew.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know that I have made, you know, riveting enough television to submit it to like the Food Network as my demo tape, but it was fun to cook with you guys.